Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Growers Live. My name is Josh Satin. Very excited to be here as usual, guys. And hopefully this time I do not have my mic muted. It doesn't look like it like I did last time. Anyways, really excited to have tonight's guest on here. We got Jayne from Earthcare Farm in Rhode Island, and really cool operation. If you're not aware of what Jayne and her crew are doing, they have an amazing vegetable operation and also a very decent size commercial compost operation. So I will get to that in a second. And just a reminder that this show and a lot of the content that we make at No Till Growers is brought to you by you guys, the Patreon members. So please, if you like what we do, give us a little chance to support us, and you go to patreon.com/No Till Growers, and you can sign up for as little as $2 a month. And one of the perks is you get to get your questions in to the guests before the live questions. So you're making sure that you get your questions answered. But in addition to Patreon members, this show is also sponsored by Farmer's Friend. And it's no secret that almost everything grows better in a tunnel. Bring the benefits of greenhouse production to your veggie or flower farm in an affordable and easy to assemble package with Farmer's Friend Caterpillar tunnel kits. They're quick to build and move, come in a variety of styles and sizes, and include everything you need to make installation a breeze. Plus, if you order 2 or more tunnels of any size, you'll get free shipping on your entire order. And as you probably know, I have 2 of their tunnels, and I'm growing 100% in those tunnels this year, and I've had the best season ever. So I highly recommend them. And also be sure to check out Farmer's Friend's growing selection of small farm tools and supplies like the Pyro Weeder, silage tarp, landscape fabric, row covers, shade cloth, irrigation kits, and more. If you're ready to increase efficiency on your farm and earn higher profits with less work, please visit farmersfriend.com today. Awesome. Thanks, Farmer's Friend, for sponsoring this and other content. And before we get into the interview, I guess there's just the schedule, but we have Eric Schultz of Steadfast Farm in 2 weeks, and I think that's about it. Let's get Jayne in here. Good evening, Jayne.
Josh, how are you?
Doing awesome. I'm glad we got all the tech stuff sorted out before we got going here. It's all good. Live shows are fun. Well, welcome to the show. If you could just tell everyone out there a little bit about yourself and the farm and those sorts of things, just to get started here.
Absolutely. I'm Jayne. I'm from Earthcare Farm. And my dad started the farm in the late 70s. He was one of those back to the land movement farmers who did not grow up farming, but just was called to go back to the land. And I feel such a resonance with that, with the everyone getting into farming right now. I just feel like this is that resurgence of that time in so many ways. But he found the biggest, cheapest piece of land that he could, and it had really poor soil. And he quickly learned about what farming's like with poor soil. It's pretty horrible and hard and stressful. And he learned over time how to build the soil up. And one of the most efficient ways for doing that was by making compost, bringing organic matter back into the fields. And I'm fortunate to be kind of now managing the farm 40 years later, after he's made these amazing fields that are just lush and rich, and also developed this really pretty large scale compost operation with just an eye for quality, because we are farmers too and have that sense of what's needed for that. And it's a unique site. It's really cool to visit, and I recommend people coming and checking it out.
Awesome. So, were you basically born into that farm?
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. I feel like most people I talk to don't have that background. So it's very interesting, as you're saying, like the sort of the new, there's not like a term for it, but like what you're seeing now. So you obviously know your dad's story with the back to the land movement and that motivation and sort of history there. But how are you feeling about this change in small scale farming now? Like, do you notice that over your lifetime, a change in the last, 5 years, 10 years? Like, what do you think about that right now?
Yeah, it's come in like little spurts, but definitely the last 2 years, a lot of the farmers coming in here are brand new, maybe a year or two, just started last year, just starting this year. People are just drawn to it right now. And I really started farming commercially in like 1999, 2000. And it was there was a little spurt back then too. So I don't know, I've seen this a couple times, but right now I think it's the biggest resurgence since the 70s that I've seen in my life.
That's, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm right in the the thick of it with help education and content creation, all that stuff, and talking to farmers all over the place. And I get messages regularly that said, "Hey, I went for it this year, and I'm having great success, and this and that." And yeah, it's crazy. Jesse and I just did a little, I don't know what you call this, but we just did a chat about like, is small scale farming blowing up? And yeah, we feel that too. But is that just from talking with growers in your area or meeting new growers, or mainly just like the compost demand and all that?
I think all of those things. People that are reaching out, the compost demand, the supplies are hard to get, things that were never hard to get before. Even just like irrigation supplies and drip tape and bins and whatever, it's all harder than it was. I think just because there's demand. But I think it's really needed. So I'm psyched that people are really into it and pumped right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I know like off air, you were like blaming me for, selling all the compost. But it must feel good for you to like, I know. So can you talk a little bit about the sort of soil management practices, just so people can understand about like the compost usage and how it's been built over the last, like you said, 40 years?
Yeah. So in the beginning, my dad was hot and heavy putting compost on. I think it needed that. Our soil had less than 1% organic matter when we first started then. And I say we, but I wasn't born yet. Metaphorically, we.
Yeah.
And then, so he did do, areas got a lot of it then. And then it's been since then, since I've taken over, I really just in the fall basically do a top dressing on pretty much all the fields, or as I'm taking out like a garlic in the summertime, I'll top dress the beds with compost. And we also have a raised bed mix, which has some mineral content as well. I've been using that a little bit more just to balance the minerals a bit. But it's made it so there's like very, very low weed pressure. And now I've got, 3 feet of lush, rich, organic matter filled soil that drains really well.
3 feet? That's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was saying that rhubarb patch I have, which I have to show you. The plants are over 40 years old. That was one of the first things he put in, and I'm terrible. But our rhubarb is just like off the hinges amazing, with just all we've done for 40 years is a little top dressing of compost, pretty much every year. So the healthy soil really, the healthy soil really makes it easy to grow. And I think finding a composter that also grows is really going to impact the quality of the compost that you find. There's just a deeper understanding of what's needed in that to make your plants healthy.
All right. So back in the day, the compost operation, was that sort of built out of like, hey, we need good compost and we can't find any, so let's make it and then make it for everybody else?
Yeah, it was slow and steady in the beginning, and it was my dad going around and picking up leaves from neighbors and going to we're in Rhode Island, a lot of ocean, a lot of fishing. So he'd go down to the docks and get fish scraps. He'd go to horse farms and collect manure. And that was for probably 10 years, him with his dump truck going around collecting things. And then he got too busy to do that. And now just stuff gets trucked here. Everything is brought here. We don't pick anything up. And it's now like tractor trailer trucks. Today we got 3 tractor trailer trucks of fish scraps. It's really neat. And tons of tractor trailer trucks of leaf and yard material, wood chips, some coffee grinds, and what else is coming in? There's some new microbreweries, so some of the beer, I don't know, spent grains.
Yeah.
And I think it's a cool way to see the neat industries in the area. We see like the end products, but we go out fish and chips Friday because we get lots of fish and wood chips and beer, just not the kind to eat.
These are good compost jokes, I guess. So can you, all right, so I'm going to try to like pick your brain a little, because people ask me these questions all the time. Let's talk about compost a little bit specifically here. People want to know like, what is compost? And then you have like raised bed mix. Like, can you talk about these things as from a consumer point? Like, people get really confused. Can you break that down a little bit?
It's super confusing because people call compost like what's under your kitchen that you're putting food scraps in.
Right.
And that's not Those are food scraps. And so like just terminology is challenging in this industry for sure. So there's food scraps, and I don't call anything waste. It's food scraps. It's yard materials. It's resources. These are all resources. And then, but then through the process, it's a man-made process that's based on nature's process of biodegrading. But that process, composting, is taking those materials that are biodegradable and turning them into compost, which is a soil amendment. It's not soil. It's something to amend your soil to make it richer.
Okay. Yeah. What about the you said the raised bed mix?
Raised bed mix. So raised bed mix, because so many people have raised beds, for like the past 15 years, we've had this raised bed mix, and it's our compost. But you don't want to just plant in compost. Like a pot of just compost is a little too nitrogen rich for a lot of things. I mean, actually your stuff will look great, but it's not that balanced. And there's a lot of research now on minerals. So we mix our compost with actually peat moss and minerals. And then it becomes a really nice substrate for raised beds. You just use that and just use water. It's tried and true. And it's a really nice product. But I don't know if that just might be unique to our farm. I don't know if other places have that.
Yeah, because I know they sell it like, big box stores will sell raised bed mix. I have no idea what's in it. That's why I was like, I'm sure whatever you guys are making is different.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like potting mix almost, like what you're making. I guess if you added some perlite or something.
It's like a heavy potting mix.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let me ask some questions about like deep compost mulch system, like the kind of the stuff that I like to talk about and the way I farm, just by adding tons of compost. And guys like the no dig stuff over in Europe, you're talking Charles Dowding, Richard Perkins, that sort of I'm talking about, just like putting on inches and inches of compost, which is great if you're selling compost, right? Because I just want to buy tons of it. So I actually had a lot of trouble with this, just because I was buying the compost that I could buy, and things weren't great. Like, it didn't drain right. It was probably too heavy in nitrogen, like you're saying. And I wound up going with 50% leaf mold, 50% compost this year, and it's been like really, really good. Have you had people asking for different sort of mixes for that sort of style of growing, or like have you experimented with that at all or thought about it?
Yeah, I've thought about it. We get asked to do different blends all the time, not just for that system, but all kinds. And we're super limited with space here. So we just have one compost, and we say it's meant to mix into your existing soil. But if you're it sounds like, if you're going to do what you're doing, go with the raised bed mix. It's not much more. It's got the peat moss in it, which is kind of the same as leaf mold. And that really helps to lighten it up a little bit. And we're in Rhode Island, so the pH here is typically about 5. It's really kind of acidic. So our compost pH is sort of designed to be a little bit higher, so that when you mix it into your existing soil, it's going to make that nice 6.5, 7. So it's about 7.2, this batch that we have right now.
Okay.
So to plant just in that, I mean, I'm not huge on pH to begin. Like, I don't know. Take it or leave it. But
I don't stress about it either.
Yeah. It's more about the microorganisms, but some people are really hung up on that. And so I'm always like, disclaimer, 7.2. It's a little.
Just show them that rhubarb leaf.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think that's like, in terms of compost producers, is that something that's important, that they're sort of like knowing what is needed in the soil where they're selling to, and sort of cater a product that way? Like, if hey, our soils in this area are low in pH, is that common? Are you guys just like way ahead of the game here?
I mean, my dad's got like 30 years on almost every other composter I know. So I think we're a little ahead of the game, but I think it's also different because most composters aren't farmers. Or, if they are, they're super small scale and aren't selling 100 yards to somebody, So I think it's important to know your area, because it's heavy to ship. So it's not like something I'm going to be shipping to California, because it's super cost prohibitive, although I'm always surprised people buy it pretty far away. But it's heavy, and I think you should know your area, because I would think if you're making a compost where the pH is 8 typically, or 9, you'd want to go more with the more carbon material, leaf and pine and that kind of thing. A little less. We're doing shellfish, and that has those calcium shells that break down and actually really raise the pH.
Yeah, I think for us they use a lot of eggshells in the compost I've been buying. So they're
Mm,
always like, yeah, it'll raise your pH. But yeah, I don't stress about pH really.
no, me neither.
Um, so let's talk about this past year. Like you said, you sold out of compost. Was that the first year you guys did that, or is that like
Yeah, it's the first time in, I think since the beginning, for when my dad was really small, and he only made 100 yards a year or
right?
something. Now it's 6,000 yards a year of the finished stuff. And we sold out for the first time last August. And then since then, every batch that's ready, which is every 2 months, another batch is maturing. It takes us about a year to make a batch. It sells within 2 weeks. So there's right now, I'm in the middle of a lag time. So we've got like another 5 or 6 weeks till the next batch is ready. So we're not
Right.
really. There's so
Yeah.
much to do here.
Right.
But it's really weird. It's really weird. And I feel so badly for our regular customers that come every year and get a couple yards and they're just showing up and I'm so sorry, we don't have any.
Right.
And the new growers who are hip to the new kind of everyone gardening got here, they were buying it in January, knowing ahead of the curve that it was going to happen.
Yeah,
So,
I speak with people in all aspects of the industry, if it's compost to seeds to tools. And last year was a run on everybody. Like everyone got cleaned out. And I know like my local farm store, they're incredible over there, but they were just like, they got no break. Like it was nonstop, like through the winter. It was crazy.
yeah.
Uh, and I think there's a combination of COVID with people wanting to garden and all that, people looking to farm. But I think you're right, that sort of whatever you want to call it, movement or, interest in small scale farming, I think is super huge right now. So I'm glad that you guys are, I wish you guys were closer. I was going to like ship it down here, but it's crazy to ship soil so far. At least I feel like it is.
Yeah, I did send some to Jesse last time that we talked, so maybe I have to work up something when the next batch is ready.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say no, but it seems like it's a long ways to move heavy things around.
Yeah.
But I think there needs to be more, local stuff. And like I've been talking with the guys at Till Soil, and they've been a sponsor on no-till growers as well. And they like sent me some, and I'm like, yeah, you guys are in Ohio. And they're like, yeah, but like, they're trying to reach out and stuff. And I don't know. I'm fascinated by all this stuff, and I appreciate what you do a lot, and I think that it's super important. So, anyways, I want to ask you about. I know we're talking about compost a lot. I want to talk about farming too. But
Okay.
if people ask me all the time about getting into small scale farming, and it's not right for everybody. But one thing I often say is like, you want to like do well, like start a compost operation. So, like, can you talk on that a little bit? I know you didn't like start it from scratch, but you know a lot about it. So, if someone was getting into wanting to do this, like, how do you go about even getting started with that?
With the compost operation, it's
Yeah.
tricky. There's a lot of initial overhead in the beginning, and that's one thing where again I'm really blessed to be coming in second generation doing it. But I think you'd have to first ask around what your local rules are about composting and who the regulating bodies are. In our state, fortunately, we fall under the Division of Agriculture. And they have tons of regulations on what you can do, but it's pretty favorable. They want you to compost if you have a farm. And I really encourage anybody who has a farm to compost because you're gonna use every inch of it, and you're still gonna probably need to buy more. But it's a great way to kind of be in touch with how much, like, I don't know what's going on in your farm too, and where you can lean up things a little bit. But I would say figure out there's the being where we have this awesome location that my dad he didn't realize that this would be a good composting location. It turns out over time that it really was great because we have 1,000 acres of woods that is where the prevailing winds go into. You got to think about wind direction is the main thing to think about because there is going to be odors, even a really well-made compost. If I have a truck full of food scraps or fish being dumped, it's going to smell just for a little while until you get that put away. For us, it takes, about an hour and we've got it all turned in and covered and put away. But in that hour time, if your neighbor's out hanging laundry, it's, it's not a good situation.
They're not excited about fish and chips day.
No, they are not. So we're really blessed with that. We're also sitting kind of at the bottom of a hill. If you're at the top of a hill, it's so much about odor science, which I don't even know if that's a real thing, but the odors drift down to low areas often. And so if you're at the top, that's an issue. I'm actually friends with the guy that runs Vermont Compost. He's really great, Carl. But his is at the top of like a mountain. And I've always been fascinated by like what's going on with that odor science up there, because ours really, can sit down. And so thinking about odors, and also a lot about, this isn't really helping people getting started. This is discouraging, I feel like. But what your surface ground is like for us, I wish in the beginning we had just gone in and gotten the expensive processed gravel and put that everywhere. But it was, clearing areas here and there. And there's mushy spots that for years I've been filling with gravel to make a nice pad, so that we think about water movement, any rain coming off the pad, it's going to flow into our retention ponds. There's a little bit of engineering to think about when setting up a larger scale operation, and making sure you have the equipment to handle it all. You want to make sure that if you have a breakdown, that's not going to ruin your whole operation. I've actually seen sites really struggle with that. We always have two of everything, two of all our machines, pretty much.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, and it adds up so quick, like two of our big payloaders and our screener, which took us many years to build up. First we'd rent a screener, then every year that got progressively bigger, and then 2016 I bought like the top of the line awesome screener that I can now screen year round, even if it's wet, and it's got stars that break up the material. It's really awesome. 2 belts that fold down, and I love that thing. But I don't know. There's a lot to think about, and there is some resources out there for sure. There's U.S. Composting Council, and there's ways to kind of get into it. Anybody could get in touch with me if they want to really start one.
Okay, well, that's very kind of you. What about the? I think about like, okay, where are you going to get the inputs from, right? So is there like those relationships that you have to build and nurture and develop, or I mean, it sounds like you inherited some of them.
I definitely did inherit some of them. And then some of them, just like, a new microbrewery will pop up, and I'd like to go meet the people and, get new accounts that way. And keeping up with like towns, like some towns do a really good job at the citizens like collecting leaves and wood chips and separating those out. And some towns it's really too much trash in there. And I'm, it's a lot of communication with what can and can't be in those loads that are coming in. I guess going out, like, just think about what's in your area. What does your area produce? Are there horse farms? Are there, cow farms? Is there, what kind of food processing is there? I always like the food scraps that are called pre-consumer. So like from the food processing plant or the kitchen, rather than after it's come from in the cafeteria. It's much cleaner, less trash that way.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And, there's actually a lot of little companies that go out and collect people's food, 5-gallon buckets of food scraps around here, and meeting those people. And it's helpful.
Yeah. That way you're not getting forks in your compost. I definitely find forks in my compost. So.
Yeah. And the fruit stickers, like where,
you totally.
Yeah. Those get through any screener.
Do those ever break down?
No, we need to address this like up high from the fruit industry, like, and just get a biodegradable sticker, or like just like a stamp or something. Like, does every single piece of fruit have to have that on there? I don't know. It seems silly.
I agree.
Yeah. But yeah, so we actually we've been really good. We haven't had a big issue with that, but I'm super careful I'm really picky and actually super annoying for people, because I'm like, I reject loads all the time. And there's, I don't take it from supermarkets necessarily, because they'll just dump a whole crate of bananas with the peels on. And I don't have time to take all the stickers off. It has to come in that way. Yeah.
That makes sense. Do you have to pay for inputs? Do they pay you? Is it free? Like, how does that work?
Mostly free, and then some of the hard to handle things like food scraps, fish scraps, they do pay us for.
Okay.
we're always at least half of what the landfill is. So it's encouraging people to come and do that. But most stuff is free.
Okay.
Leaves, wood chips, coffee
Cool.
grinds, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Cool. As I know that there's, I don't want to like, single anyone out, but I know that there's compost operations that like make a lot of their money on just charging people for dropping things, right? Like that's definitely part of the business.
Yeah, our industry, we have like a paper called Biocycle. It's a really good source of information for composters. But they can tell like a good quality compost versus a not so good quality compost by your tipping fee to compost sales ratio. How do you make your money? Is it on the tipping fees or on the compost sales? So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I think there's probably very few people listening to this that are or watching that are like, all right, I want to get it. All right. So let me.
They should. It's awesome.
I agree. Like I think I've talked to the majority of farmers I talk to in the small scale farming world. They're like either unhappy with the compost they're getting or they literally can't get it. Like they literally cannot get compost where they are, or it's like way too expensive or something. So, and it's not that great. Okay. Yeah. Well, all right, awesome. And your motivation, I think, will help a lot of people just like getting everyone excited about it. It's just, especially when you talk about the screener. I think everyone's like, all right. So I have a lot of questions about composting, but I'll get some Patreon questions in here too because they kind of asking those as well. This is from Adrian Durning. Can you explain your process for creating composts? What are the do's and don'ts of compost making? Also, can you explain why some composts take a short time to make and some take a long time to make? Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks. That's great. I highly recommend, we have an Earthcare Farm YouTube station, and I do have a tutorial of how we make our compost, just a little tour, which is helpful to go through because it's pretty involved. But we start off, we always have a stockpile of the carbon materials on site. And that's, for us, the carbon is the leaves, the wood chips, bedding, like this bean chaff from coffee, quite a few other things. But, and then we don't take in grass clippings, just want to share that. And then we always have a stockpile of that. Then when nitrogen-rich material comes in, like your fish or your food scraps or manure, we make a bowl, kind of we call it a pad of carbon with some sides on it. And then the tractor trailer truck or the dump truck, or if you're just a 5-gallon bucket, if you're smaller, we put that into that bowl and then cover with more carbon material. And you get we want 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And we kind of mix that all up. And it's a lot like making bread. You make that like well, and you pour in the wet material, and then you put in more dry and mix it all around. And it's like always like, there was like 4 to 5 cups of flour. And you're like, what is it? Which one is it? Well, it just depends on how wet everything is. Like, that's kind of there's like this art and the science to it. And some parts of it's so annoying. Like each leaf from a different tree has a different carbon to nitrogen ratio. Each wood chip is different. So in the beginning, I'm sure when I first started, even after taking it with my dad, I was like looking up on charts, like, oh, hey, what's the exact ratio? But then you get a sense of it over time and a feel for it. And then the texture, what it should be like when you're first mixing it in. And you just want to think like a microbe, I think, is what our process is about. We're creating a habitat for microorganisms. So we want it to be, cozy for them. We want it to have the right food, that 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, plenty of oxygen. They breathe just like we do. And moisture, 50% moisture. So not like they can't be drowning. We don't want anaerobic conditions. We want, oxygen, and but moist, not dried out. So once you have that, the microbes really just take over. And that's what, then it's actually pretty easy. It's awesome when we first mix up that bowl and put it on the pile. 3 days later, after that mixing, inevitably, I take the temperature, it's 130 to 160 degrees in there. And it's because those microorganisms have just exploded they're consuming and they're procreating and they're getting hot doing all that stuff. And it's really neat. So that's the process in the beginning. And then when I start to see the temperature, so every week I got my little thermometer out there poking around in all the different piles. And when I start to see the temps start to go down again, a little bit past 130, we'll flip the pile, and the temperatures will start to go up again. So I like to see, then I'm mixing anything that was in the middle, I then want on the outside, anything on the outside on the inside. So those hot temperatures are sterilizing any weed seed, plant pathogen. If you had some powdery mildew or something, it is no longer viable, because every single part of that pile has gotten turned in and hot. And we get to those hot phases at least 3 times, generally 6 times in the composting process. Then the temps really start to cool down because the carbon to nitrogen ratio starts to decrease. There starts to be, less carbon to nitrogen. And so it's a little bit less, there's a change in the microorganisms as the temperatures start to cool, as that carbon to nitrogen ratio changes. And you can start to get these, instead of those thermophilic bacteria in the beginning. You asked me to nerd out.
Let's do it. Yeah,
I see your face. I see your face. I'm excited about this stuff.
Yeah.
Then the mesophilic bacteria start to kind of take over at that cooler middle stage. And then it's still, I'm turning. I got to make sure we got enough air in there. It's easy to mess things up. Too much water. You really don't want anaerobic conditions. You don't want like any puddles around the bottom of the pile, because we call that wet feet, and that's like just going to be little pockets of anaerobic conditions. So keeping an eye on that. And then the temperatures will start to cool down even more. That's about like when they get to about 110 is when I'll screen the pile. You could kind of screen at any point, but I find when I get to 110, most everything is fully broken down, so I'm not screening out too much stuff. And then I like then to have a good amount of time after screening for the higher life forms beyond bacteria to come in. Like at that stage where like maybe 6 months into the process when I get to that screening stage, and then maybe 6 to 9 months. It just depends on a couple of different things. Then I like to have like another 3 to 6 months to let things percolate. And that's when we start to see nematodes and little pockets of fungi and this actinomyces that is like this, makes everything smell really good, like earthy, and little microarthropods. It's as it cools. So the question, getting back to that question, is like, you can make a quicker compost. And I do find like a lot of people really whine about quick compost. And I do like I think the longer it is, the better, but that will also happen in your field. Or if you let it sit at your own place, that kind of thing. For me, I like the control of having it here, because I then don't want to have done this awesome job, have no weed seed and and like all this life, and then have weed seed blow in from a weedy field or something, or, have that sitting at some garden center and the parking lot weeds are blowing in. So just thinking about that whole kind of system and what's going to impact your compost.
Awesome. All right, so let's break this down a little bit smaller, because like obviously, all right, so I'm thinking about someone who's either gardening or even like myself, small scale farming. We're adding stuff constantly. We're not like getting a load of fish and a load of wood chips and being able to mix like the batch. Like there's always stuff being added. So like any tips for those kinds of situations where you're like constantly, like taking out food scraps or cropping out a bed or something like that?
So it's the same thing, because actually we also are doing that. So you're going to still want at least 3 piles. You don't just want one pile that you're constantly adding to. You want your one pile that you're adding to, and you could put in make your bowl, have your carbon, and then put in your trimmings from your field, and then cover that with carbon. And then next time, just make a little bowl in that carbon on the top, put in some more of your nitrogen-rich stuff, mix that around. So maybe do that for a month or 2, accumulate in that one pile thing and let it rest. Let it start breaking down. And then start a new pile, start your new pile. So, and then eventually you'll have 3 or maybe 4 piles if you have enough room. And I'm losing the video, but maybe that's fine on your end.
Oh yeah, you're good over here, I think.
Okay, cool. And like I think that's a main problem I see on a lot of farms, is they just have one pile they're constantly adding material into. never letting it totally break down, and then you never really have finished compost. So just choose a spot. Like for me in my home garden, I like to choose like up to here is where I say, okay, that's getting uncomfortable for me to turn with my pitchfork. So that's when I stop, you know. And I do think like it's helpful to make a nice tidy compost pile. I like mine to be perfectly square, even in my home garden. Just like brings on respect for that pile. It looks like I see too many messy piles that don't look like that's cared for. You got to bring that in at that level. And then people are like, oh, I can do that. That looks nice. Not like some pile that's a mess.
Yeah. You're also a professional composter. So there's that too.
But you have those beautiful beds, you know, that are all nice and tidy.
Yes.
And so that should mimic that, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, so my buddy Gene, who helps out over here a lot, he helped build compost bins out of pallets, and we have a nice system. And when you walk by it, it looks nice. You're not like, oh, what's that? It's like, oh, that's a cool compost system. And the other thing, when you have a system that's set up with some sort of infrastructure, if it's, you know, some sort of structure or whatever, you're like, I want to use it. Like it makes you want to stay on top of it. So I think that there's a lot of truth to that, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so have like a bunch of carbon material and then sort of like layer that with the nitrogen that you're adding, essentially.
Yeah, and in my home garden, like sometimes it gets to be August and I've run out of leaves from the fall or wood chips or something. A bale of straw is great.
Sure.
I love having that on hand, you know. Just having handy carbon around. It's good to have that.
Absolutely.
I always err on having too much carbon. If you're going to err on making a mistake of carbon to nitrogen, you want too much carbon. Yeah.
Okay. And I think the other thing to keep in mind for people listening or watching is that it doesn't matter. Like exactly, there's no recipe for compost. It's because like all the inputs are different no matter where you are. Like if you can't get straw, maybe you can get wood chips, maybe you can get leaves, maybe you can get like I don't even what you said about coffee beans or whatever. So yeah,
coconut husks.
Yeah, palm fronds, like whatever, like yeah, all sorts of stuff. Okay, let's get to some more questions here because I feel like we could just talk on any of these things for. This always happens. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybell Karen, for green materials, what do you think about plants such as garlic mustard? Are they allelopathic? Skunk cabbage producing its own heat, mugwort, which is invasive. Do the properties get broken down in the process, or should plants like this stay out of the pile?
So it definitely depends on your pile. In my system, I'll take any of that stuff. It's going to break down to its basic elements. But if you have a small pile that's not going to get hot, I would be really careful about taking in like mugwort. I wouldn't do it. Skunk cabbage would be fine. And even if the mustard hasn't gone to seed, that stuff is a pain in the neck too. But if it hasn't gone to seed, I don't think that's going to even impact your compost pile too much because that's going to get broken down to, it's not going to be allelopathic then. It's going to just be carbon, nitrogen, molybdenum, or whatever's in that, you know. So I don't stress about, for our system, I don't stress about the type of plant.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so knowing the limitations of your own system and like, you know, what it's going to be able to handle.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the invasive weeds, because you don't want to be spreading that on your fields.
Right. Okay. Cool. When using wood chips as the carbon-rich material in a compost pile, there's always some amount of wood chip left after the composting process, even after sifting. Do you have any suggestions on how to break that down more thoroughly? For example, the ratio of wood chip to green material, biological sprays and amendments added to the pile, etc., or perhaps it's just a matter of sourcing a different brown material.
If you can double grind the wood chips, they do break down much quicker. That's really handy. Sometimes I wonder like how many times I've seen a wood chip, like how many years has this been going through my system as we screen it out. But yeah, the double ground stuff is amazing. And I think always taking a little bit of your finished compost and chucking that into your new pile is sort of just accelerating the process of something that I find we just have. I mean, it's in our tractor bucket. It's here and there. It's the essence. It's like you walk onto the farm and you're getting a probiotic boost. So I think all the piles kind of have it. So, but yeah, that's a good question. I think the finer the material, the quicker it's going to break down. So.
I mean, that just makes sense to me for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Michael Burton here says, is it safe to add deceased chickens to a compost pile? Any special considerations, laws, caveats, etc.?
You'd have to check on your local area about the laws, but there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, especially in a bigger pile where there's tons of carbon, you've got one chicken in there. That's a perfect way to honor that chicken's life and return it to the soil. So, but don't quote me. Your town might have some rule about that I don't know about. I think it's the way we should go with animals and eventually humans. I think that becoming back to the earth is where we should all be at the end.
All right. So is there special things to consider if you're trying to add animals to your compost or meat or anything like that? Is it just like it has to get hot enough? Is it a different kind of compost that you have to make?
Yeah, so for us, we have to have a putrescible permit, which is probably the same at most farms across the U.S. And that means you can take in stuff that's stinky, like food scraps, fish scraps, that kind of thing. So definitely check on that. But and that would be that. I mean, you're going to need that carbon to nitrogen ratio of 30-1. So you're going to need a lot of carbon because that stuff is really nitrogen. Any meat is. So just keeping that kind of science in your mind. But it's amazing, like feathers and that stuff will break down so quickly in that process.
Sure. Okay.
1 month. Yeah.
All right. So I have a follow-up. I guess I have 2 follow-up questions for that. And I should stay on the Patreon questions, but I can't help it. What's up with human manure? Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So we don't use human manure here. I think people are kind of grossed out by it. But yeah. It's been anciently used. I know that was like night soil. Chinese farmers used that thousands of years ago to make a rich soil. There's nothing wrong with manure, and we are animals, but we do tend to take a lot of pharmaceuticals, and there's all sorts of stuff. And I wouldn't take it a municipal manure, and we don't put any of that in our compost. But in theory, it's a great resource, and really that's what we got to get back to is there really should be no waste in any of these systems. We're designed perfectly to not have waste. So we got to figure out a way to get it back into our soil. But
right. We should
right
be
now
taking things and bury it in the landfills. Like let's recycle it back into growing food and stuff like that.
Yeah, and those wastewater treatment facilities are terrible. That's not a way to treat our. I don't know, but.
Okay,
we're not there yet, so don't do it in your farm's compost.
All right, so Jayne's saying she doesn't give you permission, but we should be learning more about it. Is that sort of the gist of it? Okay.
Yes.
All right, what about biosolids? I get asked about this all the time, and I do have biosolid compost available to me. I chose not to use it, but what's the reasons? Yeah, can you talk about biosolids a little bit? I'm sure that's part of what you're talking about.
It's our industry talks about this all the time. I am of the mindset that
first of all, can you explain what it is first?
Yeah, I don't actually necessarily. So my understanding is it's the solids from those wastewater treatment facilities that is kind of dehydrated. A lot of times it's in pellet form or kind of looks like a compost, and then it is nutrient rich. I've seen people use it to grow things really successfully. I just don't feel like I want to put that on my fields to grow food. And I still feel like there's a lot of, pharmaceuticals and estrogen and different hormones that we're taking as a society that end up in that end product. But my industry would disagree with me and say it's perfectly safe. It's a great substrate. I just don't want it on my fields. So I don't know. I think a lot of us.
I feel the same way, and I feel the same way. Like if someone told me that, I was like, no, I don't want to grow vegetables with that. And that was just like my initial gut reaction. But then I asked more people about it, and they were like, give me the pharmaceuticals, things like that. That just if you combine like the waste of society coming through that system, like there are residual things in the biosolids. But the biggest one I thought was like, man, marketing. Like if someone's like, oh, where do you get your compost from? Like what kind of compost do you use? Like you can't imagine like, oh, you want to buy carrots from this guy? Like he's biosolids. Like I couldn't even imagine trying to sell your vegetables. So
I know. We are really close to the turf industry. Turf is really big in Rhode Island. And I know it's used pretty extensively. That's probably a good use for it, to grow grass. I still think there's a better use of farmland. I'm sorry, turf farmers, I do enjoy you. But the food, I think we need to get back to food, So I don't know. I have a hard time making like lesser products. Like Oh, we have a poorer quality compost. We don't do that. Like, I just feel like, can we all just make our highest quality produce, compost, everything, you know? I think I'm getting tired because I sound like a jerk.
No, you're all good. No, I think it's your passion that's coming through about like creating really great compost. And that was, I went and actually checked out the facility and talked with them, and they were awesome. They want to show me around and everything, and it was really cool because it was I wanted you to show everyone that in a sec. All right, go ahead. Let's bring it on. What do you got there?
This is my kale leaf that I just pulled, and I have a high tunnel too. So, disclaimer: it's not like just spring plant, but I started it in October.
All right, what variety is that?
This is the 1,000 head kale.
Okay.
It's from Baker's Creek Seed, and I have I only did like half a dozen plants my first trial with it. I was impressed. And it's just like good testament of like a good healthy soil.
All right, so what do you do with that now, other than like blow people's minds? Like,
so I made stir-fried rice for dinner, and I just used one. I chopped it up really fine and threw it in there. I don't know if this is like marketable at the farmer's market. I feel like it would be because people would be so curious about it, you know?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, but I think it's pretty cool. I'm digging it. And I mean, you have to have, I'm sorry, I'm so bad at this camera, but you have to have good soil to grow a kale like that. Just imagine that nutrients in that. It's so cool.
Well, testament to your soil and your compost. So
yeah, thanks, Dad.
That's awesome. All right, let's move on from that other topic, because we got more questions here. Peter Alsop is saying, as persistent herbicides are a growing concern for composters and growers, how are they managing that problem? Do they test their finished compost for them, control feedstocks to prevent them? I've read that some composters have started using high carbon wood ash to bind herbicides. Is that something they're considered? Thanks.
Yeah, it's something that comes up all the time. So we have a tipping declaration form that every driver has to sign and agree to. It says, actually, I have one right here. I'm going to pull it up. So everybody should sign this, and it says that they understand that we are making organic compost that is used for food production. And I'm really, really careful. Most of the persistent herbicides are coming in from manure, particularly from horses. And it's because of the hay that the horses are fed, right, as in sprayed with the persistent herbicide. We're fortunate in Rhode Island that herbicide is banned on pastures. So it's a less of a chance that could happen. But I still ask horse farmers to let me know the source of their hay. And they have to verify that it doesn't contain, there's particularly 4 really bad herbicides that won't break down in the compost process and have been affecting many, many composters across the US. So that's our fail-safe is, yes, the sources coming in, that's our first check. And then our second check, there's not a good way to test for those, except for me, just regularly planting peas and beans, like all the time. Fortunately, we love pea shoots as like our main green in our house. So I'm just always planting a tray in those in every batch that we are finish. And you'll notice right away if that persistent herbicide is in there. The peas are yellow and kind of shriveled leaves. There's a lot of pictures on like Google you could look up. But if you have healthy looking, beautiful green peas coming up, then you're good. So that's both ends, how we kind of deal with that. And then there are herbicides for sure in, food production, and we don't take in grass clippings. That eliminates a big problem there. But I think once in a while there could be something for some food scraps coming in you might not even know about, melons treated or something. And I think just having the vast majority, 99%, that it's going to balance. Like, those microorganisms are powerful little beings that can metabolize so much if there's just a little tiny bit in something.
Right, it's just scary that some of those herbicides can get through that whole composting process, and then, yeah. And I personally know people that have had that problem, and then, yeah, it's a year of remediation, and
it should not be on the market. That is just unacceptable that's in our society. So, yeah, bummer.
Okay, so what are people doing about that? Is there anything we can do about that? Is it just legislation and laws and
It's
stuff?
it's legislation. That's what we have to. And I think there's 6 states right now that have signed on that you can't use that. Those are banned on for growing hay. But I mean, I think we just have to make it across the board, across the world, really. But the U.S. is where it seems to be pretty prevalent.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's see here. So more on the Patreon questions here. Mike King, he said, how often should I turn a pile that is about the size of the one in this email for Growers Live? I can't really show that. I don't know how to get that on the screen, but
is it the fish and chips one or the
yeah,
one with the fork in it?
It's a fish and chips one. So it's like a pretty big pile and it's like a front end loader.
Okay. So that's just a small fraction of that pile. But I could see, so that's our 1 tractor trailer load of fish, and then what would be 30 parts carbon, which is probably 6 or 7 scoops of chips versus 1 scoop of the carbon material. And that would get turned once a month. Is that what the question was? Turning?
Yeah, how often you turn it, yeah.
Yeah, once a month you would turn that pile. And I know like a farmer likes to do it on the full moon, so that'd be tonight.
Okay.
But, yeah, once a month for like 3 to 6 months until you start to really see everything's broken down.
Okay, so you just said something that's interesting to me. You said 30 to 1, which we've talked about before, carbon and nitrogen, but then you said 6 scoops to 1 scoop.
Yes, so that's the thing that I want to be clear about. It's 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. It doesn't mean 30 parts fish or 30 parts leaves to 1 part fish, because each different thing, like fish is made up of carbon and nitrogen. Leaves are made up of carbon and nitrogen. So you kind of have to know your ingredients that you're adding in.
Okay.
With that fish system, that's what we found. It's about 6 scoops of carbon material to the 1 scoop of the fish. That ends up being 30 to 1.
Right. So I think this is where it gets really confusing for small scale people. Are like, oh, 30 to 1. It's like 30 to 1. It's like, no, but that's carbon to nitrogen, not like the brown thing to the nitrogen thing. So, okay.
I think for the kitchen scraps, like that's what probably most people are doing, kitchen scraps. It's, I would say 1 bucket of kitchen scraps, 6 buckets of leaves and wood chips. That's a good rule of thumb. Okay. That's a terrible saying, but yeah, good rule.
I don't know. I guess that's fine. All right. So with the turning, let me just extend that question a little bit, because it was like that was very specific about that fish and chips post, which was that on your Instagram? Yeah, that was on your Instagram. Yeah. How often should you be turning a pile? Like, is there any guidelines for that in terms of like through the process? Is it just by field, doing it for a long time, or?
Our process is definitely once a month. It's like right there. I would say 4 to 5 weeks. And then, but for you, it's going to be like, you want to make sure. So think like a microbe. Does it look like it's really started to kind of sink in and compact? That microbe doesn't want to live in there.
Right.
You want to make sure it's airy. Is it getting too moist? Is it like been raining on that a bunch? It might need to be fluffed up a bit, I think that's it. Just tap into that microbe mind.
Okay. So is that the name of your book? Does that Think Like a Microbe? Or podcast?
Maybe. Yeah.
Think Like a Microbe. Sure. All right.
Yep.
Let me know how that I went in on that. Okay. And let's get one more Patreon question, and then we'll take some questions from the chat. I know we've been chatting for a while, but hopefully get at least a couple questions. So if you guys are watching this live, get a couple questions in. We'll try to get to them. C Church says, is there an optimal time to add crushed charcoal to compost? I've been adding some well-soaked crushed charcoal, but piles haven't been getting hot. Wondering if there might be charcoal drawdown. Of course, I may just be messing things up. Cheers.
Thanks. Cheers to you too. I've actually never used charcoal in our compost, but kind of just my intuitive sense would be kind of at the end. If you're wanting that sort of carbon structure in there, I would put it, just almost mix it in like you're making a soil blend with compost and charcoal, but I don't know when the best time to do that is.
Okay. I'm just looking through some of the questions here. What about biochar? Do you have experience with that, or an opinion, or how that should be used or not used, or thoughts on biochar?
Yeah. So many thoughts on biochar, and like I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I think there's great ways to use it, and I think there's times when you don't really need it. I think if your organic matter is really high, I don't really think it's super necessary, but There's a couple of great articles in Biocycle that you could look up online about biochar, and it gets really detailed in about when and why you'd want to use it. We do add a little bit. We have a special blend for cannabis growers called Kind Earth that we do mix a small amount of biochar into. People like that activation.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Let's see here.
I think also getting a good quality biochar is getting harder to do.
Okay. Can you see that on the screen there, Jayne?
Yeah. Do I add any clay in the compost?
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't add clay in the compost. We're in Rhode Island. I don't think we have any natural pockets of clay. And I don't know. I feel like people often are getting compost to like change their texture away from clay. So
right.
So I'm.
That's me.
I don't. Yeah. I don't do that.
Okay. Here's another question about persistent herbicides. Oh, this is what happened last time with this. Never mind. But I think we talked about that already.
Yeah, I think we answered that one.
Yeah. So I'm just looking through questions here. People are digging the conversation. Okay. Using human manure in flower gardens only. Yeah, so I guess...
But then the thing is, like, what if in a few years you want to grow lettuce in there? I don't know.
Right.
But I guess if you know that's what it's going to be, you know.
This is you pulled out the big kale and then totally I just got distracted and obviously wanted to talk about that. What I was talking about before, let me go back to that for a second, was this one compost operation that they've paired up with a municipality to take their biosolids and their yard waste and all that kind of stuff. Are you getting stuff from the municipal system, or is it all sort of private companies for you guys?
So we get municipal, like when they trim the trees, all the wood chips from quite a few towns. And then a few towns we get like bags of leaves from. But we're pretty picky about, there's probably 4 municipalities that we work with.
Okay. This was crazy because it was literally at the waste management facility that they set up a whole compost operation. Have you heard about stuff like that, or?
I think that's great. I mean, they're already doing it. Like, I actually kind of wish our state, they get the vast majority of the town's leaves already. And I wish they would just take food scraps too, because they always want us to take it. But it's hard to get clean food scraps. And if they're already making those town composts that are okay, they might as well take in the food scraps, get more composted. So it's not where my niche is going to be. But
okay.
There's already people making compost like that. So municipalities should do it.
All right, so we've been talking about compost for like an hour. I don't want to take too much time from you, Jayne. I know it's late, but can we talk a little about the other parts of your farm for a bit? I know you have a 3-acre vegetable farm and all these different things going on, and it seems like you are helping out everywhere. Like today, what did you do today? I know you told me already, but
yeah, we harvested 1,100 pounds of rhubarb from our field. So, which I showed earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a typical amount to harvest in a day? I have no concept of rhubarb.
Not really. Like, so our typical orders are like 200 to 300 pounds. This was just a day where like a grocery chain wanted some, and a pie place, and a bunch of restaurants. So it just was but we have it. We have an amazing over 40-year-old rhubarb patch that just gives and gives and gives. And we give it compost every year, and it gives back. Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the farm, like what you guys produce and sales and stuff like that?
Yeah, we produce. So I've really kind of gone towards perennial. So rhubarb's a perennial. I love that system, and I heard you and Jesse talking about this, but we plant grass and clover in between our paths, so it's really neat and tidy. We just mow in between, and then I actually am experimenting with some low growing clover this year. That's called Black Beauty, that you don't even have to mow. Yeah.
Did Jesse know about that one?
Probably not. I think it's a Rhode Island thing.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a seed company. One of those turf growers is growing this low growing Black Beauty clover. Because I can totally agree with Jesse that when the mower sprays the clippings on your produce, like my strawberry bed or something, it's super annoying. So we have rhubarb, strawberries. I grow garlic, a lot of garlic, and asparagus. I like those perennials. This year I actually got a bunch of elderberry. We're putting in a big, huge hedgerow of elderberry. And then I grow all the typical stuff, but just small quantities of it, like tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, that kind of thing, just not a ton. The other stuff is really marketed more wholesale, restaurants and groceries.
Okay. Wow. So how do you handle all of this at like as a manager, as a person managing this company? Like I juggle a lot of jobs. So like, can you talk on that a little bit about like how you got the composting, you got the farm, you have employees, and then I don't know if you want to talk about the other thing that you were talking to me before, but you have a lot going on. Like, what are some strategies? Because I know all of us are doing a lot of things right now. So
yeah. So I have a gardening service too. We take care of gardens. We have 50 gardens in our South County area that we tend. But so that is me, and we have 5 women gardeners that go off and take care of those. And I actually barely leave the farm. So it's just a lot of communication with customers, and then the gals are actually now doing the gardening work. And then I have my team, my 2 production guys for compost production. They are handling the compost production. We have a lot of meetings. And then I have my office manager. It's really just her. I would say office team, but it's just her. Thank you, Nikki. And then I generally have like 2 sort of intern farm hands. They're paid. Everybody's paid. And then I have a big family. That's the clincher. But so today with the rhubarb, we picked 1,100 pounds, but I had 6 retired older people that came to help me wash and cut off the leaf. And there's no time pressure. And there was 2 toddlers, and me and the 2 20-year-olds are harvesting all the rhubarb and bringing it into them. So that's kind of how we do it all. But my job is really to manage and make sure everything's happening, and I jump in wherever it's needed that day. But meetings at the beginning of the day and end of the day, constantly thinking about systems. I'm big into the lean thinking. I love the lean farming book.
Me too, yeah.
We have a lean farm group here. I'm with 3 other farmers, and we meet up, not last year, but regularly in the past couple of years, where we'd go to each other's farms and really look at a system and analyze it and figure out how to make it more efficient. Such a cool thing to do.
Oh my God. I want to, yes. I love that stuff. It's some of my favorite things about farming, for sure.
Yeah, there's just a lot of that in this community. And I think like what you're doing is like that on a big scale, but I think everyone listening needs to do that on their small scale. Not with your like direct competitor, but in my group, it's a flower grower, an oyster farmer, and somebody who does like pastured chicken and poultry and beef. And yeah, he does pastured animals.
Sure.
So we're none of us are doing the same thing, but we all have that same efficient mindset. Deeply caring, efficient mindset, that so you can actually do more in a day and it's less stressful. I'm actually taking weekends off. Like it's like a new thing. Like I have more time because these systems have gotten more efficient. I'm also deep in. We're 40 years into a farm, so right. I have my water system down. I've got my walk-in cooler. Those first couple of years of setting that stuff up are so hard. And you figure out every year, okay, what are the 3 processes we really want to streamline this year? And then that's what we think about the whole year.
Jayne, this is like how I roll. Like, put in the time up front, put in your systems. I mean, I'm always thinking about footsteps. I'm thinking about, is the tool in the right place? Do you have to go back and forth 2 times, 3 times? All that stuff adds up. And if you put the time to think about these ahead of time, you save forever on them. So
totally.
Yeah.
And it's a real mindset. Like today with the rhubarb harvest, we pick in bundles of 10, and you don't move your body. You pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You make your stack right there. No footsteps or anything. Then you move to the next plant and do that. Then someone can come by and pick up 10 bundles of 10. You got 100 right there. And it's easy to keep track. It's easy to stack. You know what's coming out of the field. It's like just really helped to streamline everything. And you just have to be thinking about that all the time. And it's hard to sometimes teach new people, but once they get it, then they're looking for the solutions, themselves. And that team is awesome. To co-optively think about all that together is really cool. How we're saving our back and We have
Yeah.
weekends off.
I think there's a lot of power in that also if you take that time and figure out the best way to do things, and then that's your SOP. Like when you get a new employee, it's like, no, we all do this the same way. I'm the owner here, I'm the manager, like you're the farm hand. Like we all do this the same way because this is the best way to do it. And if someone has to hop out for a minute, someone else can hop back in and everyone knows what's going on. So I find that to be really, really helpful. We talked about this I went to go see Spencer Rudolph at Sage Hill Ranch Gardens, and I love those guys and that farm. And they talked about they call it like a relay race. Like they'll flip beds and like everyone just kind of knows what to do and kind of follows each other because we all do it the same way. And I think that's awesome.
Yep.
So it sounds like the management style is having really good people that you communicate well with and have really good systems. Is that okay?
Yeah, and just like caring about everybody. Like
sure.
I know. First, this was funny when I talked to Jesse last time. I mentioned that we have like a retirement plan, and that was like the takeaway for so many. So many of the questions afterwards were about that, which is so funny. But like, you can do that if you're efficient. It takes less time. You can treat people better. It's just like it compounds. That it's pretty exciting. Yeah, really, really make a living.
Yeah, right. And take weekends off, which I don't think said no farmer ever. Yeah. All right. Do you guys have any more questions in the chat here? I haven't seen many questions. I guess people are just wanting to listen to Jayne talk.
They went to bed. No,
I know it's hard, and it's like we have people listen on the West Coast as well. So for them, it's like much earlier and everything. But yeah, no worries. Jayne, anything else you want to add, or maybe should we try to wrap things up here?
I think we're good. We talked about a lot.
Yeah, we did. Well, Jayne, I really, really appreciate you coming on tonight and creating compost for growers in the Rhode Island area, because I'm sure they appreciate the care that you've put into making your product. So I really appreciate it.
And it's awesome that you've created this community to share in too. It's really awesome. So needed.
Yeah, and we'll keep pushing deep compost systems for you guys out there. All right, Jayne, thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh.
All right, guys. Well, that wraps it up with Jayne, really special lady and really cool farm and operation there. And I love chatting compost and all that kind of stuff. And it's super cool. So anyways, there's links down below if you want to check out what Jayne's up to and follow along with their farm and everything. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks with Eric Schultz of Steadfast Farm.